is my real life. It was the life that I was meant to live, but for the cunning, baffling, powerful allure of addiction. And it's like the last speaker said, it's pervasive. It's alcohol. It's opiates. It's marijuana. It's if you got it, you know it. My story starts like a lot of others. Predictable white middle class boy, predictable white middle class upbringing that lasted through my college graduation and into my early 20s. And to be honest with you, the chances that I would have ended up a white middle class functioning alcoholic with a wife and children and a job and a house by my mid-20s was definitely where I was headed. When I was in high school, I started drinking on a weekend night here and there, and a party here and there when I was 16, and I smoked pot for the first time when I was 17, and I was off to the races. By the time I was a freshman in college, I was drinking weekly and smoking pot almost daily. In fact, I always said that I was much more of a pothead than a drinker, because I liked pot a whole lot. One of the tragic ironies of my life that it's now legal to. And I've been arrested for pot several times, and now I want to write the DEA and have all my convictions exonerated. But I had dropped acid when I was in high school. I had my fun with that. I learned everything I needed to know from that drug, and I moved on to some mushrooms here and some coke there, and that's kind of where it stopped. Pot and booze, those were pretty much where I stopped on a regular basis. In fact, one of my favorite lines is the comedian Dennis Leary. He was talking about pot, and he says, people always say that marijuana leads to other drugs. No, marijuana leads to carpentry, okay? That's what marijuana leads to. And I hung out with that crew, actually. The guys I smoked pot with, we used joints, we used pipes, we used bongs, we used gravity bongs, we used apples, we used carrots. I don't know, I was shocked too when that worked. But after I graduated from high school, I left Omaha like my ass was on fire and went to college in Chicago. And when I graduated, I bounced around the western United States quite a little bit. And I spent the summer of '99 in Alaska. I lived in a tent in Seward. That's where the carrot pipe incident took place. Yeah, when you're getting high in the wilderness, you get pretty creative. But I eventually moved back to Omaha for a minute, and then Seattle, Colorado, and back to Omaha in 2002. And I've been here since then. So I had some, Jack Kerouac, Grateful Dead in me, and I took to the road naturally. And I don't think I ever crossed a state line and I wasn't high. I loved driving and smoking pot. It was one of my favorite things to do. And booze was a close second until I turned 21. It was my junior year in college, and I turned 21 in December, and within a couple weeks of the start of my second semester, I was working as a bouncer and a bartender at a bar called, and I'm not kidding, House of Beer. My parents were very, very proud. I managed to keep up a respectable 3.5 GPA through the rest of my college years, and I still worked at a couple of 4 a.m. bars on Division Street in Chicago, which is the big bar area. And some of the bars were open until 2 a.m., some of the bars were open until 4 a.m., 5 a.m. on Saturdays, actually. And really, every night was a party night. Everyone, the bartenders and the bouncers and the servers, everybody drank all night long along with the paying customers. and I mean all night long. Sometimes the shift was from 4 p.m. until you got off at 4 a.m. and we drank the whole time. And that was one of the more interesting semesters of my life, because I was a history major in college. And the semester I first started working at a 4 a.m. bar, I worked there on Mondays and Wednesday nights into Tuesdays and Thursday mornings. And my first class on Tuesdays and Thursday mornings was Irish history. I fit in just fine. Me and the rest of the drunks, it was great. And I guess that's when my alcoholism really blossomed, and that's also when my addiction started to get me in trouble. I got arrested for the first time when I was 19 for possession of marijuana, and I got arrested the second time the following year for trespassing when my brother convinced me on our way home from a party in a drunken stupor in Wrigleyville that we should try and jump the outfield fence at Wrigley Field at about 5 a.m. in the middle of a February blizzard so we could see the field all pretty and snowy. Yeah, that's the story all in itself. It's also one of the last great stories that to come out of drinking and using for me. There was a good time here and there, and through the rest of my career drinking and smoking pot, if I had personally evolved to where I grew out of smoking pot every day and drinking every day, my story would have probably turned out very different. But it didn't, because that's not me. I'm of the addictive personality persuasion, and if I find something I like, I do it as often as possible. I never really did a lot of it, well, later. But at first, during my 20s, I never really did a whole lot of smoking pot, but I did it as often as possible. And after I got sick, I needed it all the time. I had brain surgery, and I almost died when I was 25. I had come back to live in Omaha in 2002, and I got hired as the lone staff writer at the Reader, the news weekly. And I was paid shit, and I loved every minute of it. I mean, I was paid writer. I was good at writing. That's the thing that was my gift. And somebody was paying me to go and write every day. It was a dream come true. It really was. And I think I've never cleared $22,000 a year. I covered everything for the paper. I covered national, state, local issues, personal profiles, community events, you name it. I wrote about it. And I still smoke pot daily, and I was a functioning alcoholic, but I was dedicated to my job. And I probably spent 60 hours in the office per week, and I would come home, and I would write at home, and I would take care of everything that I had intended to at the office. I would be pretty much high the entire time. And I had actually convinced myself, as many writers will, that I was a better writer when I was high. If you believe that, I got a bridge to say, okay? But so, let's see, where was I? Oh yeah, and in 2005, I got sick, and I used to say that I did die, because in the medical sense I kind of did. At some point after my fiance took me to the hospital, and before the brain surgery, I did go into respiratory arrest, and if they hadn't hooked me up to a machine that did the breathing for me, I would have been toast. I had bacterial meningitis, which is an inflammation caused by bacteria that basically it's bacteria that eats the outer layer of your brain, is what happens. I was a bartender at the time. It was my second job. I bartended on Friday and Saturday nights at this restaurant up the street from the offices of the Reader. And I went to the doctor earlier in the week, and my doctor, he called it the worst sinus infection he ever saw. And if you don't know, sinus infections are pay dirt for meningitis. So the meningitis ran up into my brain, and so the brain surgeon opened my head up and tinkered around in there a little bit, cleaned things up, took out some gunk, and I'm not kidding here, he stapled my head back shut and put me into a drug-induced coma for the first few days of the healing process, so he could bring me out of the coma gently enough that I didn't seize and die. It was a perfect sermon. Everybody said it was a perfect sermon because so many things could have gone wrong and did go wrong. In fact, from some research I did years later, I learned that 1 in 10,000 adults who contract bacterial meningitis actually survive. So I was a miracle. Unfortunately, the sickness did some damage. I lost most of the sight in my left eye. The vision of my left eye is like looking out of a really, really dirty window. And I have some pretty significant, call them cognitive deficiencies, that I will have for the rest of my life. I'm not going to go into the nature of them, but I have a lot of problems with short-term memory. It's funny because you know how when you're applying for a job, all the applications, the postings say we need somebody who can multitask and has an attention to detail. I'm shit at both of those things. I have no attention to detail, and as soon as you give me more than 2 tasks to do, I fucking panic. Can't do it. It's like, give me a job on an assembly line. I could do that. But let's see, where was I? So anyway, I have the problems with my memory. Pretty significant problems with my short-term memory, actually. The abscesses were on the part of my brain that affects my processing and short-term memory. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Memento, but that movie is actually really, really close to what I have. It's not amnesia per se, but it's very possible. This still happens today, where I will do something or somebody will say something to me, and literally 5 minutes later, I have no idea. I don't remember at all them saying it, me doing it, whatever. So anyway, since I cheated death at the hands of what I wrote down is basically the best way to describe it is I was playing with a pretty good hand intellectually, and the sickness took out all the face cards and left me with a pair of 5s, basically. And that was what I had to deal with. So I decided, since I had cheated death at the hands of meningitis, I was going to do it myself. It became a very, very angry person. And I'm going to try not to get emotional here, but in fact, that was probably the most common thing people said to me after I got sober, is that I seemed to be a much happier person, because when I was at my worst, I was angry all the time. I was angry at you. I was angry at you. I was angry at the world. I get really emotional when I talk about this because most of all, I was angry at myself.